Moving on from logical reasoning drill set number 4 over at lawhub.lsac.org, we come to question 2. Again, we keep our highlight tool ready and we're going to read the question stem first to identify what we are being tasked to do. And question 2 reads, which one of the following, if true, would most weaken Helen's explanation? So we highlight Helen's explanation along with the task term of weaken so that we are focusing more on Helen's argument rather than Tasha's on the left, knowing that there are two speakers. So we will still want to highlight both speakers' conclusions as just part of our overall process, whereby we always highlight the conclusion of an argument to focus us on the most relevant information. But in this case, we are going to try to mentally predict what would weaken specifically Helen's explanation, whatever that is. So let's read Tasha's statements first with the highlight tool ready to identify her conclusion at the start. Novels, rather than poetry, make up most of the writing by 19th century female writers because, lacking private writing rooms, most women wrote in noisy surroundings. Writing fiction requires less concentration than writing poetry. So Tasha's conclusion should be relatively apparent. It's just that novels, rather than poetry, make up most of the writing by 19th century female writers because they lacked private writing rooms and most women wrote in noisy surroundings. So we've highlighted that statement. And now we're going to read Helen's statements and identify her conclusion as well. Helen replies, "You're right that most 19th century women lacked private writing rooms. But lack of money was the reason they didn't write more poetry. Anyone who couldn't afford to have a private writing room also would have been unable to afford the formal literary education required for writing poetry." So Helen's conclusion is that lack of money was the reason that these women, these 19th century female writers, didn't write more poetry, not what Tasha stated about lacking private writing rooms and having to write in noisy surroundings. So we need to weaken the idea that lack of money was why these 19th century female writers didn't write poetry. And we can recognize that Helen also provided this evidence about not being able to afford the formal literary education required for poetry. And we want to keep that in mind, that we want to say, well, no, it wasn't that it was lack of money, that they couldn't afford to go to these expensive writing schools. So we keep that in mind as we move to the answer choices, keeping our highlighting tool ready to mark reasons to eliminate as we go. So choice A, most 19th century male writers did not have writing rooms of their own. Male writers. We're talking about female writers. I need a whole lot of additional information to relate this to Helen's argument about female writers in the 19th century, so we can eliminate choice A, hopefully almost immediately. Next, choice B. In the 19th century, a greater percentage of poets than novelists had private writing rooms. Now, this is a little bit tricky, but we got to make sure that we're focused on females. If we just say poets versus novelists, I don't know whether that's male or female, so this too needs additional information. And by reading carefully, we should be able to eliminate B almost immediately as well. Then, choice C, most 19th century female poets were also novelists. Okay, so they were also novelists. But what about the novelists who weren't able to become poets? Again, I need additional information to relate C to anything involving Helen's argument regarding lack of money being the reason that these 19th century female writers didn't become poets, so we don't care about those that did become poets. Then, choice D, the institutions providing formal literary training in the 19th century excluded women. Well, ding, 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 this is exactly it, because now it's not about being able to afford the formal literary education required for writing poetry, because the women weren't able to go to those schools anyway. So this directly attacks Helen's evidence, and we should have D almost jumping off the screen at this point as being the direct way to weaken Helen's argument. And then choice E, most of the novels written in the 19th century were written by men. Again, we're concerned with the women. So what the men did would need additional information. And hopefully you can see how even with a two-speaker structure, you can predict to identify how to weaken an argument, as we did here, to reach the correct answer of D. Thank you for watching this logical reasoning drill set number 4 explanation video from the content over at lawhub.lsac.org. If you enjoyed the tips it contained, please consider liking the video or subscribing to our channel so that you'll be notified when additional videos are produced by my guru. Also, Check out the description below because in it you'll find additional links that will help you as you continue your LSAT journey, including links to full sets of full prep test explanations produced by my guru. And remember that while you're preparing for the LSAT, it's supposed to be hard.